How's the dental emergency? Is it okay?
Uh, so much better now. Yeah, I got a big fake replacement tooth now. So I guess it's technically a crown, but the other tooth just shattered in like 5 places. There was like,
Oh,
all right,
did you
we're gonna.
bite something hard or just like run into something?
Yeah, I bit something super hard. I've never actually done anything quite like that before, but it was some kind of hard something in a piece of bread, like a seed, and it just was the right point of impact and just created like this little mini physics experiment in my mouth.
Yeah, that's oh,
I was so ticked. I was like, why does this stuff always happen right before I got to do something important? But it all worked out. Like this little mini physics experiment. Wasn't cheap, but what is anymore?
yeah. So it looks like we are broadcasting. So let
Oh,
me
good.
go ahead and tweet this out to our followers and whatnot. And if you want to let your
Yeah,
folks
tag me
know,
in
and
and I'll.
yeah,
Sure. No problem at all. Let's see. There we go.
I'm so like used to typing in www.thegdex.com because I've been to it. So every time I type it, all right, the GDEX. All right, throw a little image on here, make it look good.
Cool. I always like looking good.
Oh man.
Yeah, really look fine on. Yeah, looks like I can see my video too. I look fine.
All right, should be up and out.
Sweet. I will retweet it.
We'll wait for a minute, get them going. Other than your tooth, things going well?
Yeah. Sorry. Say that again. That part.
Other than your tooth, things going well?
Oh, everything's fine. Yeah. I mean, teeth notwithstanding, it's too bad that we need them. If I was to redesign human beings, I'll never get that opportunity. But if I was, I would probably just give us all like bone there or something, or we'd all have to eat soft food or something because
Yeah.
teeth. I hate them.
I mean, you could. What is this? Publish. I don't want to publish as a job. What is that? Just publish. Let me try this again. Yeah, you could always get those screw-in implants. They have
Yeah,
all
that's
fake
true.
teeth.
That's true. My dentist even suggested. He said, we could just tear that out and put in an implant. And I'm like, well, don't you have to like wait a bunch of time? Like you got to put the screws in, then you put like some sort of temporary in there, and then you got to go back and do it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, but in the long run, I'm like, I don't feel like thinking about the long run right now. Just give me a crown and we'll be done with it for today. And
Yeah.
so, who knows? If this thing ever breaks again, then maybe I go the implant direction. I don't know. It's obnoxious though.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully I was at the dentist actually last week, but no major issues. So.
You're like my wife. She has perfect teeth. She's always had them. She never had braces. She never had to do anything. They're just pearly white and perfect in every way. She still has her wisdom teeth. They grew in just fine. Like she's an anomaly, and it drives me crazy. It's the one's like glaring inequity in our marriage. Her good teeth versus my crappy ones.
Well, I guess good for her, I suppose.
Yeah. She grew up in Mississippi. I'm not saying that all Mississippians should have buck nasty teeth. I'm just saying she's an anomaly down there. That's all.
Yes.
No offense, Mississippi. Everybody's fine down there.
except their teeth.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Sounds good.
So we've been broadcasting for a few minutes, but it looks like people are joining. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the GDEX pre-interview. I am Chris Volpe. I'm here with Scott Johnson, who's going to be coming in with his wife to celebrate everything Columbus has to offer. So, Scott, thank you for coming. We got connected through Steve Hamaker, who is a Columbus native here, also an illustrator. And do you consider yourself to be an illustrator by trade, or at this point?
It's kind of halfway weird in the middle bit for me. Like half the time, this literally like 50% of the time I am doing illustration, commercial work, that kind of stuff. And half the time I'm podcasting, broadcasting, streaming, whatever. And they both complement each other well, but they also kind of both represent half of what I do, half of my revenue. Like it really is kind of weirdly split down the middle. So yeah, people sometimes ask. In fact, it's easy in certain family situations. I was at a funeral the other day, and there are a lot of really old relatives there, and they all are asking, "What am I doing?" And whenever they do that, and I look at them in their 70s and 80s, it's actually easier for me to say, "I am an illustrator."
Yeah.
And that's all they have to know, and they get that. That's the thing they understand. If I have to explain internet radio and how it's distributed and how people can get it, then I'm, it's a nightmare labyrinth of conversation. So
Yeah.
it helps me in that way as well.
So why don't you go into that a little bit more? Just I always ask the guests to sort of just talk about themselves and their history. How did you sort of move from illustration into podcasting, and you're heavily involved in the sort of gamer nerd world. Why don't you give us a little background on that?
Sure. That is the one common thread for me is gaming. Video games in general have been a part of my life since almost as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, up through my late teens, my dad owned arcades in town. I'm here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we used to have it in the 80s. He had a small cocktail sit-down arcade machine in every Pizza Hut from the top of the state all the way down to St. George, right before you hit Nevada and Arizona. And there would be Saturdays where I'd just go with him all day collecting quarters from these machines. And of course, I was a kid, so I would get like free pizza, free pop and soda and stuff, and then I would sit and play Pac-Man or Galaga or whatever it was for hours and hours and hours and hours. And
that's awesome.
It was amazing. It was the greatest thing ever. The only problem was we had a house full of arcade machines all the time. Usually a few in the garage, some in the basement. They were kind of all over the place. And I never really knew if I had any real friends or not because people come flocking over, right, to play. And I wasn't ever sure if they were there because of me, they want to hang out with me, or because I had all these awesome arcade games that they had free play. But that got into me just a very basic ground level love for the medium, and it never ended. I've had every console. I'm always a PC gamer. There's always something fun to play. My Switch is sitting right over here, just begging me to pick it up all the time. Like there's something about that world, and not so much just the games. The games are important to me, and I do love them, and I have a blast, and it's all good. But I love the industry around it. I love following that. I love commentating on it. I love learning the inside scoop on a lot of stuff. And as a result, it's really informed everything I've done, from the art side of my business to certainly the podcasting and broadcasting side is very much game related. And I can't really separate it. It's just a part of it. And, in a lot of ways, it's the continual piece of inspiration out there that I can always look to and say, oh, this is a thing I can satire in a comic, or this is a thing I can build an entire show around, like World of Warcraft and The Instance, that sort of thing. And it's turned out to be a really cool symbiotic relationship. My dad died at a pretty young age in 2000, and I wish he could be here to see how, my initial Space Invader days when I was just a tiny kid would turn into something much bigger and much more involved than I would have ever predicted back then. So yeah, gaming's at the center of it all in a really cool way.
That's really awesome. Well, let me ask you real quickly, what was your first console?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first one that I owned outright, and I wasn't playing somebody else's, would have been the NES. My friends had an Intellivision. I never had one. I had another friend with a ColecoVision.
Coleco was mine.
Was it yours? Yeah. See, and those things were awesome, and I used to love playing them. But there was always this feeling of like, well, I'm never going to get to choose what I want to play because this is somebody else's console. The Atari was the same way for my cousins and stuff. NES, I went and earned the money, mowed a bunch of lawns, saved up, bought it myself, and have had every console since then. I think I even had a Master System, which technically I think preceded it a little bit, but I went nuts, and I just had to have it all. And especially the 16-bit era, suddenly you're, working and have a little disposable income. I'm like, all right, I want that Genesis, then I want that Sega CD, then I want the that CDX, which nobody should have spent money on, but I
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
32X, all those things, all of what Nintendo had on offer, I was way into, and it's really never stopped. The only bummer, the thing I regret the most probably, is I haven't really kept everything. I wish I had kept all these devices and the
Yeah.
games that came with them and had this collection, because what I would do, N64 runs its course, and you're like, well, I really want that Dreamcast, so I'd sell the N64, get the Dreamcast, and I've always just kind of rolled that way, with the exception, I guess I've got 360s, PS2s, and stuff laying around, an old GameCube. But now, as I'm an adult, I don't care as much about collecting the newer stuff. I wish I had the old stuff. I guess one day I'll be glad I hung on to these that I have now, but right now I'm a little bummed I don't have that full collection, because I should.
Yeah, I still have just about everything, but I sold my Nintendo and all the games for Mortal Kombat 2 for Super Nintendo because I was just totally into Mortal Kombat.
Well, wait. So you remember that version of MK was they didn't have any blood; it just had the sweat. Were you cool? How
Yep,
were you with that?
that was the original. Yeah, the original Mortal Kombat. The number 2, I believe, had the violence back in it.
It did.
But yeah, I was when Mortal Kombat came out, man, I was totally into that game. And
And
now I wish I had my Nintendo.
The thing about that era was that was like the really hardcore Sega versus Nintendo fan kind of fights.
Yep.
And there's always this thing. It's Sony and Nintendo, or Sony and Microsoft now, but there's always been these rivalries, and that was particularly bitter. I remember because when the first MK came out, all my Genesis friends were just, slagging all of the Super Nintendo people off because they were like, "You guys have sweat, we have the blood, we've got the real game. All the fatalities are in here." It became this like real badge of honor for gamers at the time, and then 2 comes out. And the SNES version of 2 was vastly superior to the Genesis version of that game. And, everything switched again. But I used to love watching that rivalry. I was never really part of it because I had everything and I kind of liked both. But I loved watching that sort of thing. And these days, I kind of am bummed about how much fighting goes on. The internet has certainly amplified that. But there used to be kind of a good back and forth in those days. And I don't know if we still have that now or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely that blood sweat thing drew kind of a line in the sand for sure. And there were definitely. I mean, I still think the Super Nintendo is one of the best consoles ever made. Like there were just so many good games on it. I don't think the Genesis could compete really.
No, they didn't. They wanted to, and they had a few moments there, but
yeah.
But at the end of the day, I don't think it's actually possible to look back in any sort of objective way and not see that Nintendo ruled that 16-bit era. It was really a strong showing.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know about nowadays. Like I'm on the PlayStation universe now, but I was 360 the previous generation, so I just kind of hopped over. A lot of it had to do with the E3 announcement, the way they promoted the Xbox One. I just at that E3 announcement, I was like, all right, I'm gonna move on for a minute.
I know, isn't it weird? Like that was what 2012 or 13 when they did the announcement. I want to say it was 13 because it was that later that year they all launched them, and I remember thinking, this is really weird PR. Like I couldn't understand what they were doing. They didn't seem like they were talking to gamers, and that's been the story of this generation. The truth is, and the irony of it all is, we're kind of now there. We're almost in the vision Microsoft was laying out now.
Sure.
Over the last few years, we've become okay with online all the time. We've gotten way cooler with certain free-to-play models. Like a lot of the stuff that they were suggesting is now happening on other platforms, and we're just not talking about it. It's a bit like Diablo 3 launching with online all the time connections, and everybody flipped out and couldn't believe they were doing that.
Yeah.
And now it's just everywhere. Like it's funny how that stuff changes, and it reminds me of the 360 era when Elder Scrolls Oblivion comes out and they sell that horse armor for $3 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And everyone lost their minds. It was this huge deal. Oh my gosh, I can't believe where they're going with this. Now it is laughable to think that was really the only example in gaming of a micro payment you could make for a thing in a game that you paid full retail for.
Yep.
Now it's the most ubiquitous thing ever. The free-to-play model has evolved well past what anyone expected. Like we are just there are times where I wonder, when we're freaking out, I should stop and go, no, wait a minute. This is they're probably onto something here, and be a little more predictive about the future, because man, horse armor was the death of gaming, players thought. Now nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, well, it still might have been the death of gaming, but we're here regardless. Yeah, no, I just like each individual component for their thing wasn't necessarily what got me. It was just the way they packaged it and marketed it. And at the same time, I didn't have a PS3. One of my friends let me borrow one for The Last of Us. I
Hmm.
actually own two copies of The Last of Us. I don't own a PS3. Um, and it was just a combination between seeing how strong Sony's exclusives were, combined with like this weird messaging. I was like, I'm just gonna try the PlayStation 4, and I don't regret it. I mean, there isn't really anything on the Xbox right now that's won me over, but it's weird how a stumble nowadays can really. I mean, that's a years long impact.
Yeah, they all do it too. Like in Sony's case, the initial Xbox, the original Xbox, it wasn't a screaming success by any measurement, really. Um, and so it didn't. No, everybody thought, well, coming off the PS2, which is the highest selling console of all time, and still is, I think. Everyone thought, well, Microsoft, there's no way they're going to be able to compete with Sony in
Yeah.
here. Sony just gets cocky and big, and they kind of blow it. Now they caught up in the end. PS3 did okay by the end; they were pretty equal.
Yep.
But in those initial goings, it was looking real weird for Sony. That all these restrictions and strange ideas, and the Blu-ray thing was weird how they implemented it, and backwards compatibility being taken away, and all the stuff that was going on in that
Yeah.
initial launch. Then you get to the end of another generation. Microsoft's all big and cocky.
Yep.
And then they start making those same kind of mistakes. And you watch that flip again. It's kind of hilarious because it happens, I swear, every time.
Yeah,
In
there's that
before
like the third console
Sony was,
curse. That
yeah,
and yeah, I don't know. Actually, this is kind of interesting because you with the instance, I mean, you're involved in a lot of Blizzard
yeah.
stuff, and I mean they've had their fair share over the years of missteps, but I think they always manage to pull it up. How are you feeling about Blizzard nowadays? Are you an Overwatch player?
Yeah, I like Overwatch a lot.
You mentioned
I,
Diablo. I didn't know if that.
yeah, I pretty much play them all. And been playing Blizzard games since they were founded. I think my first Blizzard game was probably Rock and Roll Racing or maybe Lost Vikings. I
God, that
can't
game
remember.
is so good. Rock and Roll Racing. I
It was so good. It was
They
great.
need to bring that back.
I agree. A remastered, updated, still make it isometric, but maybe a little polygon treatment on a Switch or something. I'd play the
Yeah,
crap out of that. But
hell yeah.
they have just always been this bastion of great principle based gaming. Like they won't, they were always willing to wait as long as it took to get it where they wanted it. They still are that way. They'll cancel huge projects in favor of a better game. And Overwatch is a good example of that. In my time at Blizzard, I've gotten to know a lot of the people there. And one of my favorite results of working with Blizzard here and there is I've gotten to be really good friends with Chris Metzen, who's since retired at the ripe old age of 43.
Yeah.
But
This
really,
game life, it's a hard life.
yeah, it's real hard. But he and I chat and talk and stuff, and through his insights and through what we know publicly about Titan, their big follow-up MMO,
Yeah.
that was to be the next big thing, and then having that be canceled, $150 million spent on that thing, just canceled and done, and then having the wherewithal to say, all right, we're going to take what was working, which is the shooting mechanics, the characters, the world, the story, the backstory, and we're going to make Overwatch out of it and build a competitive shooter, sounded crazy. But they're really good at that. Even out of their failures, they figure out a way to rise from the ashes and make it work. And that thing is $1 billion game. It is multiple times well paid for what it cost to throw Titan away. And they did it in a relatively, game developer time frame was relatively quick, and it's really impressive. So I followed them for a long time for a whole lot of reasons, but one of them is this tenacity to figure it out. When WoW was their big money maker and things started to dip a bit in users, they were faced with, well, are we the World of Warcraft company or are we Blizzard Entertainment with a bunch of various options? And they got back on the stick and they built different divisions and different teams and they started making games, and they're all bona fide monster hits. Even those that have a hard time competing because they're late to the game, like Heroes of the Storm, is a profitable enterprise for them and one of my favorite games. So,
and I mean, Hearthstone came out. I mean, there's a bazillion card-based games now.
Oh
But
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, when Hearthstone came out, I mean, I did not expect that game to catch on like it did. I mean, even it seems like Magic the Gathering Online, which has been around for, eons in software terms, it didn't have that kind of like grab that Hearthstone had.
Yeah. It could have. See, this is one of these cases where Blizzard's ethic gives them, they may not always be the most original. For example, Gathering was Magic the Gathering is this long heralded thing, 25-year-old property that people still play in droves every weekend at their favorite comic book stores.
Sure.
They're playing with those physical decks. There's now a better digital sort of thing going on than there was pre-Hearthstone, but that was their war to win, and they just weren't ready for somebody like Blizzard to sweep in and go, well, we're going to take your basic ideas because we love it here. We play Magic every night here at the office. We're going to make our own, and we're going to make it digital, and we're going to make it awesome. And they do that every time. They did it with World of Warcraft. They were all EverQuest nerds. They loved
Yep.
EverQuest, playing it like crazy. They're like, hey, what if we made one? And the minute Blizzard does that is when everyone should get nervous,
Sure.
because they know how to kill it. And while I would argue the only area where they haven't exactly done that at the level they're used to would be Heroes. But again, we're talking about League of Legends with 100 million players and Dota 2 with,
Yeah.
some distant second place. But
I
it's
still
a
think
harder
Diablo
crack.
needs a little bit of. I think they went off track a little bit with Diablo 3.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for the longest time, Diablo 3, if you include Loot Point 2.0 and the expansion Reaper of Souls, I think it's an incredible game. The problem they have is that they don't have a really good long-term strategy for it, the way that, say, Path of Exile or some of these other action RPGs have come along and stolen their crown a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thinks this year at BlizzCon we're going to get a major Diablo announcement, and I guarantee you, if there's any indication by Blizzard's current and other projects, we are looking at Diablo's future as a game service future.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be, I don't know, but I am thrilled to find out what the heck that's going to be, because I played a lot of Diablo 2.
Me too.
And 3 as well, and I feel like I'm ready for wherever this goes next in this more kind of modern era of this game's always being updated and it's always got new content and we're buying cosmetics or whatever their model is. I don't care. I'm just very excited because as in terms of those action RPGs and how they play, Diablo 3 still plays better than any of the current competition.
Oh yeah,
they all have,
absolutely.
Yeah, they all have some cool advantages, but just the minute-to-minute mechanics are so good.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I hear you, and I'll put one last thought in here because I want to be cognizant of your time. But like, I felt, mechanically, Diablo I thought was great. It just seemed like the aesthetic and the story, like Diablo 2 was so kind of gritty and dark, and just it had soul. No pun intended, I guess, but yeah, there was just something missing. But that's fixable. Like the mechanics are super tight for 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let me ask you a few more questions before you got to run, because I know you got things to do too. But so you're coming to GDEX in, oh my Lord, like 4 days here. You want to talk about some of the things you'll be speaking about? I know you're also going to try to have a group meetup and get some of your folks together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because it's a chance to talk about this weird little space I've built for myself. And it has, there's aspects of it that are related to why did I wait until 2009 to do it when really I could have probably done it in as early as 03, 04. What factors made it possible for this to be a business that I could run and basically just fulfill my 11-year-old self's dreams. But not just that, things like what can you do to establish good support systems for yourself? For example, what priority do I give family? And the answer is all priority, and this other stuff just sort of works out. And I have some theories as to why that is, but a strong support system. Like you mentioned earlier, my wife's coming with it, which is great. She's always great to bring with me at things, but she's also kind of my business manager in a lot of ways. Like we share a lot of the responsibilities of that stuff. And I think there's some value in people hearing how that gets balanced. How do you raise 3 kids and do this?
Yeah.
How do you is that a benefit to raising those kids? Is it a negative? Is it a combination of those things? Like we're going to get into all of that, plus, just some of this historical perspective and why gaming is so important to it, and why it's more a life around games is more than just this trivial, free time pursuit. It's something much more than that. It's a microcosm of humanity that just fascinates me. What drives us to play, to achieve, to win, to experience story and narrative, and like all of these things kind of combine into what I hope will be an interesting talk about why it drove me where it drove me and why I'm here now, and how there was no way to predict it. I mean, when I was younger, there's no way any of this was possible without the internet, without all sorts of other innovations that have nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But being able to follow those, track them, stay with it, go for it. So and there's a great story in all of this about the final leap for me to finally say I'm going to do this full time. And it was a scary, scary couple of weeks. I didn't know what the impact of it was going to be. And the only real regret I have is that I didn't do it earlier. So hopefully people will get some stuff out of that. Got some great reference material and some other things I'm bringing. So I'm very excited about it. I can't wait.
That's awesome. I'm super excited to have you out. I was going to ask earlier, but maybe we can just leave this for the weekend, because I'm always interested in hearing people's stories that are just sort of like, to be honest, like kind of a hot mess. Like my background is the same way. I didn't do like an A to B to C kind of thing. And you sort of, you have these opportunities and they present themselves. And a lot of times you take that scary step and it works out. And it seems like you're doing a lot of interesting things. So I want to know how all that built on top of each other and got you where you were, so that now you can look back and see those pieces. Because like you said, you can't do it when you're kind of in it moving forward.
Yeah.
You just try to make the best decisions you can.
You kind of have to get through some of it to even talk about it. That's true. But also here's a little tidbit that'll hold some people over until they hear me talk about it at the show, perhaps. And hopefully it's interesting to some people. But I used to think that what your dreams and thoughts and ideas and passions were when you were in your 10 to 12-year-old range were things that were just going to go by the wayside no matter what. It would be like your willingness to play with army dudes in the sandbox. You would get tired of it and move on to other pursuits. And I've learned that the opposite is kind of true. When I was that age, all I wanted to do was draw and make radio shows on a tape recorder. That's all I wanted to do. That was my passion. I loved it. And between those two things, I'd like to play Combat on the 2600 or play, Super Mario Bros. In the arcade or whatever. So those were kind of my three main things. And those two main pursuits, there was a time in my life where I went, well, that's just kid stuff. No one does that. That isn't a thing you do for a job. So I got to focus elsewhere or whatever. And to make a long story short, I'm doing exactly what my 10, 12-year-old self wanted to do, like exactly down to the bone what I wanted to do. I just didn't know it could be a mature adult pursuit with nuance and all the other things it can be. And that to me is the big takeaway from, if I've experienced anything, it's this: don't let that stuff seem like it's old and dumb and you've grown past it. A lot of times that is where your life should be headed. And you may get there in a roundabout way, and it may seem like a really strange happenstance that you got there, but those passions were real, and they're as real today as they were then. So we'll talk about some of that this weekend for sure.
That's awesome. Well, let's leave it on a high note where I always leave it, which is, what are you personally, outside of doing the talks, what are you personally excited about at GDEX?
Well, a couple things. Number one is I've never been to Ohio and I've never been to Columbus, and it's the one city in Ohio I've wanted to visit.
Oh, awesome.
I've known Hammaker for years. He's been a great friend and a great dude. We met through one of my shows he listens to, and I have huge admiration for his art and what he does. And so a chance to hang out with him is exciting, but really just to see this city that everyone raves about and spend some time with some of my listeners who I wouldn't otherwise have a chance to meet. We have meetups all the time, but it's not always easy to get all the way out there or get them all the way out here. So a chance to hang out with those guys a little bit. But really the main thing is just Columbus has, for whatever reason, has a cool spot in my head. Okay. As awesome. Like a rad town, and I guess I want to test that and see if it is. I mean, obviously it's just a weekend. I'm not going to see everything, but I don't know, something about that's intriguing. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be fun.
Sweet. Well, we are glad to have you. I keeping an eye on the weather. It looks like it's going to be a gorgeous weekend. And at GDEX, there's going to be a ton of stuff to do. So, Scott, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again for being on the end. Again, it's Scott Johnson. You can find him at Scott Johnson. I am Chris Volpe at Volpe Creates. And in 4 days, we're going to have GDEX, and you can learn more at thegdex.com. Any final words, Scott, before we leave?
Just stay hydrated, everybody.
Good advice. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you this weekend.